Here's Jimbob to claim that God explains the universe.
So if premise one is truth is universal and conceptual,
What does it mean for truth per se to be universal? Truth is a property of beliefs and claims, and sometimes a claim is universally true, but sometimes a claim is only true in limited circumstances. For example, if someone says it's raining, whether that claim is true or false is going to be contingent on the time and place in which it is uttered.
and premise two is concepts are dependent on a mind or come from a mind or reside in a mind. It totally follows from my position, the conclusion. I could argue that because human beings are particulars, we can't actually ground universal concepts.
Truths can absolutely be universal while still only existing in the minds of particular people. The idea that there are no married bachelors, for example, is true universally, even if it only exists in the minds of people. We don't have to search every planet in the universe to make sure that there isn't a married bachelor hiding out on one in order to know that there aren't any. And that's the case even if the concept of bachelorhood only exists in one person's mind. That's how universals can be grounded in particular minds.
We can discover them, but we can't ground them. For instance, truth being universal and conceptual, that can't only exist in your mind or mine, right? We're particulars, right?
Sure.
Okay.
This isn't an explanation of anything,
Hold on.
though.
No,
a deduction isn't an explanation.
Look.
How does God do this?
Are you saying arguments aren't a type of evidence?
No, they're not. Evidence is described by premises. Arguments are what you then do with the premises. They are inferences that you draw from the evidence described by the premises.
No.
Okay, do you
An
agree
argument
that
isn't
an argument's not a type of evidence? There goes the justice system.
Well, let's say I'm a prosecutor and I say the defendant's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel of the stolen car. I'm presenting evidence, but I'm not making an argument. I have to make an inference in order to make an argument. I'm not making an argument until I say, therefore, the defendant probably stole the car. You need to present your evidence first in order to base an argument on that evidence. You need to build an argument from premises.
No, because they use evidence.
Well, no, you have to argue for the evidence.
On what premises would you base such an argument if the premises are not themselves evidence of the conclusion you're trying to demonstrate? I don't need to make an argument that there are fingerprints on the steering wheel if I could just show the court that the steering wheel has fingerprints on it. I need to make an argument if I want the court to draw the conclusion that the fingerprints mean that the defendant stole the car, but I don't see why I need to make an argument to simply show the fingerprints.
They present the evidence in the form of language.
Arguments.
Simply saying that the defendant's fingerprints are in the stolen car is not an argument. It's just a claim.
But that's not what...
What is evidence without an argument?
A premise.
It still exists, even if I'm not there to make.
By the way,
the
arguments
argument.
don't exist under his worldview anyway. So you're asking, I'm giving you an argument for why I can actually argue. I can actually take a position to give an ontology for truth, and you can't.
Truth is a property of statements and beliefs. That's the ontology. Why does that require a God?
But that's just a claim. I want an
It's not a claim.
explanation.
No, arguments aren't just
Explain
claims.
how
dude.
God does
Look,
it.
He's dodging the argument. He doesn't want to deal with the
I'm
argument.
asking you the question. I'm not dodging
I'm
anything.
giving you an argument, okay? If truth, you're asking why does theism make sense under this view? I'm telling you, we have to start from truth. If you argue truth doesn't exist, if we argue from a position where we don't have to justify truth, what are we doing?
What do you mean by justify truth? Why would truth need to be justified? Maybe what you mean to ask is, why should we believe a claim to be true? To use the word should or ought, which is implied if you're looking for justification, implies that one has a level of control over one's beliefs that I don't think I have. It makes no sense to tell me that I ought to believe in God if I can't find the arguments for God to be convincing.
We're just pretending truth exists. Hey, argue the second part of the argument. No, I'm cornering you. And I'm cornering myself right now because before we get to secondary propositions about reality, you have to assume truth exists.
I'm not sure what Jimbob means by truth. He talks about it like it's some kind of object, like a platonic form rather than a property. Presuppositionalists seem to think that it's pointless to have arguments unless there are true statements and we can discern with absolute certainty what statements are true. I don't think we can know with complete certainty what statements are true even if there is a God giving us truth through revelation. Even if that's the case, we are still fallible. We can still mistake God's revelations for false revelations and false revelations for real ones. The problem of whether we can know the truth, even if it exists, isn't solved by God.
Okay? I asked you, does it exist? You said yes, right? You tried to argue that it didn't exist universally and conceptually and absolutely. right? That's a contradiction.
No, it's not. If truth only exists contingently, it still exists.
Now, to finish my argument, if premise one is truth is universal and conceptual, and concepts come from a mind, and we agree that we're all particulars, not a single person in this room is the source for the universal category of truth, right?
Wrong. Since truth is a property of claims and beliefs only come from people, people are the ultimate source of truth.
Not one person in here, right? We're all particulars. It's reasonable to say human beings who are particulars cannot ground themselves. They can't be the grounding for universal concepts.
Yes, they can. You can make up a concept, stipulate something that is always true of that concept by definition, and that's a universal truth.
What I'm arguing is that a universal mind can do that.
Okay, I mean, that's your claim.
That's an argument. Challenge one of the premises.
So the topic of this debate was what best explains reality. So if I grant that I can't give a naturalistic explanation for all this abstract meta stuff, okay.
I can. In fact, I just did.
You can't do science.
Those are a couple of things that I can't do, but we're talking about reality, which is so much more than that. So you said God is responsible for the world. Explain. I believe that God is responsible for the world. Are you asking for a naturalistic explanation? No, I'm asking for a theistic one because
I believe God created from his free will, he spoke into existence the world.
What does that mean? What does it mean for speech to occur without there already being space, time, and matter?
So if I had if you asked me these kinds of questions and I just said, oh, it happened naturally as the answer to every single question, then I'm not explaining anything by saying it happened naturally. When you say God did it through his power, by his sovereignty, you're not giving an explanation, you're just giving a declaration and really nothing else. So how did God create the world?
All you're doing is presupposing naturalism to be what an explanation is.
I'm not. I would have the same question because I'm trying to discern what an explanation is if it's not a naturalistic one. I'm not presupposing naturalism. I'm trying to understand what the alternative is and how it explains anything.
Because I'm asking you the question, you get to adopt your worldview. It has nothing to do with
it does. You're using the word explanation. No, hold on.
When I ask you questions, it's not according to me.
It is, though.
It's according to you.
What's an explanation? That you're using the word explanation.
You get to assume your own worldview to do
My
this.
explanation is the impossibility. It's the impossibility of the contrary. It can't be naturalism because it's endless regress.
I'm not convinced that's the case. A brute fact with no deeper explanation is not incompatible with naturalism. And even if there is an endless regress, why would that be impossible? As Bertrand Russell said, there's actually no logical problem with an endless regress because there's no logical problem with a series with no first term.
Could you explain how God created the world?
Supernaturally.
That's not an explanation.
It's a claim.
So you don't have an explanation for that.
We're talking about reality.
Yes, and you can't explain it.
If the topic is what best explains reality, theism or naturalism, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that Jimbob would be able to give an explanation.
Well, explain would assume naturalism, right? You can't explain a mind, and yet here you are pretending you have one.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
A mind is a process carried out by the brain. You'd have to ask a neuroscientist to get into the details, but a mind can, in fact, be explained.
Do it.
I absolutely can.
Naturalism, explain the mind.
The mind consists of perceiving, thinking, feeling, etc. These are all activities, and the brain is what is carrying out these activities. Maybe Jimbob would say that the soul is carrying them out, but I have no idea what a soul is even supposed to be, or what it means to say that it does anything. Also, even if the mind is ultimately grounded in an immaterial soul, whatever that means, why would that require a god? Several of the most prominent philosophers who are critics of the physicalist view of the mind are David Chalmers, Thomas Nagel, and John Searle, and they're all atheists.
We're talking, see, you're running away from theism because you don't have any explanations.
No, I'm not running because in your question, you're assuming naturalism.
How is it assuming naturalism to ask for an explanation? To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.